You're listening to a CNA podcast.
How often do you look at the bottom of your fridge and go, "Ooh, gross," and throw some old food away? We all do it, don't we? Imagine this at a restaurant or a supermarket. The scale goes up a bit. Actually, it goes up a lot. Food waste is a big issue, a global issue. And today, we're looking for a better way. Hello and welcome to Climate Conversations. I'm Jack Board, Li Ling Tan. Hello to you.
Hello.
What's at the bottom of your fridge?
Okay. So I looked before I came in because I knew you were going to ask me about this. And I've
assess the status of your fridge.
I've got a bag of soggy watercress and 2 zucchinis growing mold.
Yum.
Because I bought extra for a potluck a few weeks ago and then subsequently forgot about them. So these will go into my worm compost. There's also a bag of dried ikan bilis or anchovies that's about a year old. Those can't go into the worm bin, so I will probably toss them in the garbage. And also some bruised, very ripe pears, but I'm completely fine eating bruised and ugly fruit, so those will stay another day. What about you?
My fridge is looking okay. It does tend to have some of these specimens that you've just laid out every now and then. The fridge tends to be more empty than full, and I blame that on the fact that I'm an intrepid journalist traveling all the time, rather than the fact that Bangkok has so many delicious foods that can just be delivered within 5 minutes. Going out, delivering in. But the fridge gets its use. It's got a couple of bottles of wine in there. So
can't waste those.
No, you can't. Now, in Singapore, though, and we're going to focus a lot on Singapore today, this issue of food waste is really significant. And we laugh at it, but a place that we consider a really cheap food paradise where finding something delicious and nutritious is easy and affordable, but so much of that food is getting thrown away. We'll have a special guest shortly to talk us through an interesting solution to the problem. But now, time for the weekly quiz. Li Ling, are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
It's a new game. It's a new game.
Right.
It's a mix and match game. Today, I want you to match the country with the food item that is most commonly discarded by households in that country. Okay, so we have 4. We have the UK, Australia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And 4 types of food commonly thrown away: rice, vegetables, bread, and prepared meals. I want you to match which food belongs to which country.
Why you always have to go and make things so complicated?
This is Avril Lavigne.
That's right.
Right.
Wow, throwback. You're revealing your age there, Jack.
Okay.
Actually, I'm revealing mine because I know it too.
And we'll be revealing the answers as well at the end. News time. Li Ling, you've just experienced a European summer after your holiday over there. It was a hot one. Now there's some data about last year in Europe that looks pretty alarming as well.
Yeah, it's an extension of the conditions that we've been reading about in the news over the past few years, the rising heat situation. And I've got some worrying numbers for you from last year, 48,000 or nearly 48,000. That's how many people were estimated to have died last year in Europe due to hot weather. It's the second highest number of heat-related deaths in a year, second only to the year before, when more than 60,000 people died from record-breaking summer temperatures. But here's the thing. The death toll would have been 80% higher if not for measures that were put in place to adapt people and places to the rising heat. And that's according to the study by researchers in Spain. It's still a high number, even though 80% is quite a reduction. So what this does is it highlights the role that climate adaptation plays in saving lives and the urgency for more effective strategies to reduce heat-related deaths in what will very likely be hotter summers ahead in the region. And we saw how all that played out this year during the Paris Olympics and what the weather is continuing to do in parts of Europe, right?
Yeah, really hot summer over there. I got quite a few friends, Australians, like to go over to Europe for summer, escape the winter, and they're struggling.
Yeah.
But boo-hoo,
It was
really.
Rough. It was rough, though. There were days that were really difficult to bear.
And what about Asia?
Asia is no stranger to heat-related deaths, right? We've seen reports of people dying as a result of record-breaking temperatures here in the region, including in Thailand, where you are, right? We've talked about this. So Asia is also heating up at a faster rate than the global average, but heat-related deaths are apparently hard to quantify because a lot of them apparently go unreported. So we don't have a tally for the region like the study did with Europe.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about heat so many times, and I've done stories about heat, and we say it again, it comes back to having proper data. And the data just doesn't exist for either understanding the extent of the problem and the health risks that exist, and also to help decision makers determine what are the right solutions for their cities, for example, which parts of the city are hotter or not. And just having more information would enable that death toll that you've spoken about that would have been 80% higher. I think we could really target much lower numbers simply by taking this issue more serious. So, heating up everywhere, and we'll only be talking about this more, I'm sure. All right, now you're going to talk to me about birds.
Yes, I am. So we've already discussed quite a bit here on the podcast about the risk of diseases getting more prevalent as the weather gets hotter.
Yep.
Now, we've covered dengue and other pathogens carried by animals. So I've got another one for you. This time, it's the risk of superbugs coming from the skies.
All right, come on.
Yeah. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? It's superbug.
Awesome.
Okay, but it's no laughing matter, really, right? Researchers from Oxford University have found that wild birds, such as crows and ducks that live close to humans, they can carry high levels of bacteria with the ability to resist common antibiotics used to treat diseases, some common, some not so much, but diseases like gonorrhea, typhoid, and anthrax. Now, they studied the guts of 30 species of wild birds across 8 countries, and they focus on a bacteria that causes Campylobacteriosis. It's a type of diarrhea that commonly occurs in many parts of the world. So zoonotic bacteria like this can spread between animals and humans. That's what it means. That's what zoonotic means. And that means wild birds have the potential to transfer these bacteria strains or superbugs over long distances to livestock as well as pets. And as cities get more crowded, it presents new opportunities for these pathogens to spread. So the findings show an urgent need for policymakers and health services to pay attention to this mode of transmission. And because birds migrate and move across different countries and continents, there is the need for coordinated global action to limit the impact.
Yeah, it sounds like a really important area of research. I think even within this study, the people behind it said it would have benefited from a big expansion geographies, types of birds to really understand this issue more. I can't help but feel like the conspiracy theories are going to re-emerge. We already have this like weird subsects of the internet that think birds are government spies, and now they're going to be calling them.
What are you reading, Jack?
Yeah, it's
what
a whole
are you
thing.
reading?
It's a whole thing.
Oh my goodness!
And now they're going to say birds are like these deliberate mini dirty bombs, I'm sure. Just get ready for that.
Pigeons are already considered the rats of the skies, right? They carry so many diseases. So imagine if these diseases that pass on to us can't be treated with our antibiotics. That's going to be a real problem.
Always the bearer of good news.
Yes,
Thank you
always.
for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's go to our main story this week. Would you believe that about 1/3 of all of the food produced around the world is never eaten? It's a staggering statistic. Let's just crunch some numbers. 45% of fruit and vegetables wasted. 35% of all fish and seafood never makes it to our plates. 30% of grains like wheat, rice, oats, spoiled. The United Nations has set targets to urgently reduce the causes and impacts of this problem. And within its sustainability goals, it aims to halve food waste by 2030, and for good reason.
So what you said, Jack, 30 to 45% of those foods we produce being wasted or thrown out. It's a huge volume, and the problem goes across the entire food production chain. For example, produce gets lost or damaged at the farm, or they get discarded over blemishes or misshaping because the supermarkets and retailers won't take them. Some get lost or damaged in the period of being transported from farms to retail stores. Then there are the the major culprits at homes, restaurants, and the food services sector. Add it all up, and it's estimated at more than 1 billion tons of food waste a year, or about $1 trillion worth of food going into the garbage, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization.
And this has profound impacts on several things. One, global hunger. At the same time as all this food is getting wasted, there are still hundreds of millions of people going hungry. Two, economic losses. You've mentioned there $1 trillion of food being wasted. Just think how less productive, how less profitable the food sector is because of this and all of the businesses around it. And then, number three, greenhouse gases. We often talk about the emissions that come from food production, but what about the estimate that up to 10% of all emissions on the planet are caused by food waste?
Yeah, so this colossal amount of waste is failing people, right? It's failing markets and it's failing the climate. And that 1+ billion tons of food waste globally, you mentioned that this was about a third of all food produced in the world per year just gone to waste. And that means it's feeding nobody at all. Here in Singapore, food waste accounts for about 11% of total waste. And the total volume of food waste here equals about 750,000 tons per year. A simple answer to reducing that is to donate excess or unsold food rather than throw them out. But food businesses have been reluctant because of strict safety regulations and the worry around being liable should someone fall sick or die from eating their donated food.
Not anymore, though. The government has recently passed a bill that enables food donors to give away their excess or unsold food without having to worry about being liable, as long as they meet a set of safety and hygiene conditions.
It's called the Good Samaritan Food Donation Bill, and it was tabled by Member of Parliament Louis Ng, who joins us now on Climate Conversations.
Hey,
Hello.
Lewis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Thank you for joining us. Louis, first I want to get a sense of who this bill is going to directly affect. We're talking restaurants, caterers, supermarkets, and grocery stores. How extensive is this list?
So, as extensive as we could. So, anyone that donates food will be covered under this bill, provided, again, there's no money exchanged for the food. So, it's really for charitable, benevolent, and philanthropic purposes. Then they will be covered under this bill.
Can you give us a little bit more detail about what it actually protects them and how?
So it took me 4 years to draft this bill, and it really started when I was with my daughters for a meal, and I really saw firsthand a restaurant throwing food away. And when I asked, why don't you just donate it or pass it to me, and I'll pass it to some of my residents in Yishun. Surely they will love this food. And the restaurant told me that they were worried about liability. So if someone gets food poisoning from eating the donated food, then they could be liable for both civil and criminal prosecution. And that's what a lot of the restaurants, hotels were worried about. And that's why I thought if we could look into this, have a new piece of legislation that will protect food donors when they donate food, but at the same time, really have some safeguards in place for food safety and hygiene, then I think it could be the best of both worlds, where we can reduce food waste and provide food for the needy as well.
So let's say I'm that restaurant and I've got a bunch of leftover food. Now I can donate that food without fear of being sued or being arrested or being fined if someone gets sick from eating it, as long as I meet these specific food safety conditions. Can you tell me what those conditions are?
So maybe I'll share an example first of what the restaurant shared with us during a dialogue where the restaurant had leftover food. They gave it to the cleaners, and I shared this story in Parliament. The cleaners felt, wow, it's prawns, so I'm going to keep it overnight. They didn't keep it well, but they ate it the next day, and they did have food poisoning. And so that restaurant said, my goodness, I was trying to do something good, but I might get into trouble in the end, so stop donating food altogether. And so what we have done is to find the best of both worlds, where there are 4 conditions. So the food has to be not unsafe and unsuitable at the point of donation. The restaurant had to tell the person they're donating to of how the food should be transported or kept in a certain way. And then they had to tell them about the time limits as well, within which you have to consume the food. And lastly, they have to comply with any food safety and hygiene regulation. The key being, this is a really long guideline, I said it in Parliament, but let's see if I can remember this. SFA guidelines for social service agencies and food charities involved in food preparation and distribution activities for charitable purposes. First thing they're going to do is reduce the number of words in this guideline, but they have to comply with it. I'm quite amazed I can still remember it. But so in this case, for the restaurant, as long as the food was not unsafe and unsuitable at the time that he donated it. It wasn't. He should have told the person he donated to how to prepare, how to transport the food, how to keep it in a certain way. And of course, you have to tell we have to consume this within the 4-hour time frame of the food being prepared. And of course, comply with the guidelines. If the restaurant owner did that, which he did, then he would be covered under this bill. He would not be liable for prosecution for both criminal as well as any civil cases.
So it's important to not just think about the process of actually donating and the point where the food is handed over. The person receiving the donated food also has to be very careful about how it's kept to make sure it doesn't go bad,
for example,
right?
For that specific story, he could have told the recipient that they should have kept the food refrigerated, for example. So again, there are many ways that they can communicate this to make sure, again, that they will be covered under this new piece of legislation.
Okay. A big part of this is about reducing food waste. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the math. Singapore generates about 750,000 tons of food waste a year, and you talked about this in Parliament, but it imports 1.6 million tons, which is 90% of its food produced. So are you saying that we're wasting nearly half our food supply every year? And where does it all go?
So it could be. So it's about 750,000 tons of food that we throw away every year. And just that 1.5 million is actually the most commonly consumed food. So it could be, I think I shared in Parliament, was about 47% of the food that we import could be thrown away. And it's a crazy figure, again, that we're wasting that much food. And it's actually, of all the waste in Singapore, food waste is about 11%. It's a crazy amount. It's just so weird that we have people that are struggling to find 3 meals a day, and at the same time, we throw away that much edible food every day.
Do you sense that there is awareness of this? I guess it's a habit that's formed of wasting food. And you feel like there is a sense of goodwill as well, that people do want to do something better with it, but they just haven't been able to before.
Yep, so that's another crazy story. So I did a video to explain this bill just before I introduced it in Parliament. And I filmed it at a bakery, and I was telling the auntie, actually, all this food that I'm seeing here, are you going to donate it at the end of the day when you don't sell it? And she said, he showed me the same thing. Her boss says cannot donate because they're worried they'll get into trouble if someone eats it and gets food poisoning. The next day, I presented the bill. I mean, that's how real it is on the ground, where there's so much food that could be donated but is thrown away. But in my closing speech, I mean, that's the key thing that I shared. It really shouldn't just be about food donation, but about addressing our throwaway culture to start with. That we're producing so much and wasting so much. Good that we can donate the food, but we really got to rethink this throwaway culture. Don't waste food in the first place.
I was struck by one of your quotes. I think you said that it's scary that food waste is so ingrained in society now, and something that you just mentioned then. And you noted as well that some businesses have already started to factor in food waste into their costs, which to me is extraordinary, but I guess it makes sense. Can you talk about the sentiment that exists and how businesses have configured the way they operate, knowing that they will not sell everything that they have for sale or that they're producing?
So that came out during the consultations, the closed-door focus group discussions that we did. That some were saying, I was saying, let's all this excess food, again, why don't I bring it to some of the rental blocks, some of the kids, the families there that are struggling, would love to have some of this really good food. And it really struck me when some of the restaurant owners, the hotels, were telling me, actually, Mr. Ng, don't worry. If you want food for your residents, why don't I just cook fresh food? All this food that I'm really prepared to throw away, it's already factored into my business cost. And that really was the scariest thing, that food waste is actually factored in already. Of course, it's nice to have fresh food to donate to the needy families, but again, we're stressing that it's good news, but it's not really what we're trying to focus on at this point. And again, there was a larger picture of how we really got to tackle food waste at the source itself and not just focus on food donation.
And a big issue about this waste also isn't just about the food that's being thrown out, right? It's the energy and the water and the resources that went into producing and then distributing the food and everything. So it's really quite a massive amount of wastage across several factors. Moving forward, how much of a dent do you hope this will have on Singapore's waste problem? Currently, the food recycling rate is around 18%, I believe, right? Where do you expect it will be a year into this law going into effect?
So we have some promising surveys that were done by the Restaurant Association of Singapore, where I think they surveyed their restaurants. 80% supported this bill. 60% actually said that if this bill is passed, 60% of them would start to donate food. 20% was neutral, so I think we have a good middle ground that we need to convince now. But a large proportion still were worried about liability. So we have some more work to be done to assure restaurants, hotels, bakeries that with this new law, they can donate with some peace of mind. And again, that's why I shared in my the closing speech that we still have to work on the guideline with really long name. I shan't repeat it again, but we got to work on that guideline, strengthen it. Again, provide some assurance, concrete examples of how people can comply with the 4 conditions. I think with more certainty, a lot more will start to donate the food.
Obviously, Singapore is not the only country with this issue. Have you seen this kind of policy working elsewhere in the world? I understand that France was the first country to introduce a policy that prevents supermarkets from throwing away unsold food. But have you looked at ideas like that as a possible future directive?
So the US was the first that introduced a Good Samaritan law, I think 30 years ago, and that did result in an increase in food donation. I shared 7-Eleven said they would increase the donation of food, and at the same time, there wasn't any issues in terms of civil and criminal cases as well. But France takes the next step where they not just say you could be possibly donate food, but they mandate it.
Yeah.
Could it be a next step? I hope not, that everything we do in Singapore has to rely on legislation. Again, I hope this bill where it encourages food donation, waives liability, more of the companies, the bakeries, the restaurants, hotels will come on board on their own.
In terms of the food waste issue, a lot of this is about consumer behavior as well, right? You talked about your children. At home, do you have any tips that you practice to save food or prevent food waste that you can share with us and our listeners?
I just nag my daughters all the time, they know. And I'm not joking when I said it in Parliament. People will say, Louis, you say I cannot waste food really when I sit down at the table. And that really makes me happy that it drives home that message that, again, it's about not just about donating the excess food, but not wasting it in the first place. And that's why I shared, it really started with my grandma. That generation was really about not wasting. And that's why it stayed with me for 40 over years ago. I used to scoop rice at the family meals, and I always see my grandma's food there, that she was the one that sacrificed. She would eat the meal before. She doesn't want to waste anything. And
Oh, wow.
I always say in Parliament, I'm not asking for something new. I'm asking that we remember what it was like previously, where the pioneer generation didn't want to waste anything. They wouldn't. So even plastic bags, my grandma will only take what she needs. I remember she'll fold it once we get home. She takes the things out. She will fold it so that she'll reuse it. Everything was never wasted, and that's something that we ought to bring back.
Yeah, I remember growing up, my grandmother would tell me, if you don't finish every single grain of rice on your plate, your husband's going to have pock marks all over his face.
This is what I get told now. My wife tells me, you have to finish every piece of rice. Otherwise, think of the farmer that grew that rice. Okay,
Yeah,
scrape
yeah,
the
I
last
do
few
that.
pieces. But yeah, I think it's a good philosophy.
I was going to share that story living in Parliament, but I took it out in the end.
You were.
That's what my grandma used to tell me, all the little bits of rice, and next time your partner will look like that.
I think it's a Singapore thing. They told my brother the same thing. Your wife is going to have lots of pimples. I
That
mean,
was a generation. After a bit of nagging, they start to threaten you.
yeah, that's right. Great. Thank you for joining us today, Lewis. It's a pleasure to have you
Thank you so
here.
much.
And we hope to talk to you again soon. Maybe
Yep.
catch up about how much progress this is doing.
Yeah, let's
Right.
revisit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, quiz time. Repeating the question. Match the country with the food item most commonly discarded by households. It's UK, Australia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and the 4 food types: rice, vegetables, bread, and prepared meals.
So wait, what constitutes prepared meals? Are we talking leftover food or like frozen dinners?
Yeah, leftover food that people have made at home. They might
Oh.
have made too much, and so they'll throw away the extra.
All right. So I'm wavering between the UK and Australia when it comes to bread being the most wasted food item. But I think I'm going to go with UK for bread, Australia for prepared meals. Because I know you guys do so much barbecues and those are massive meals that you prepare. Malaysia, rice, and Philippines, veggies.
All right, going to assess your scores right here. I'm going to inform you you have got 1
Oh.
out of 4.
Oh,
But I like some of your thinking, some of your logic. UK is bread, and bread is actually one of the most thrown out items all around the world. Obviously, there are cultural differences to why some countries throw or consume more types of food than another. That makes sense, right? UK, bread, and similar in the Middle East and in America as well. Australia is vegetables. We are bad with vegetables and fruit sitting at the bottom of the fridge
Aye.
and going to waste. Malaysia is prepared meals. The, I guess, culture of cooking a lot for family and cooking too much, preparing too much food, and that extra getting wasted. Philippines was rice.
Oh, wow. Okay. Huh. That's really making me think a lot harder about where I'm buying food and how much I should buy and eating out, especially because so often there are these buffets you get in cities and when you go for dim sum.
Oh, the buffet breakfasts at hotels? Staggering amount of food waste. Has to be.
Yeah.
What's your household's most commonly discarded food type, would you guess? For me, definitely fruit and vegetables, I would say. Yeah.
For me, it's fruit and vegetables as well.
But we do compost.
Yeah, so do we.
That's it for Climate Conversations. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
And who knows, your suggestions might be our next discussion here on Climate Conversations. Until next week, I'm Li Ling Tan.
And I'm Jack Ford. Thanks as always to the team that put together this podcast, Tiffany Ung, Janani Jahari, Crispina Roberts, and Sai Yerwin.